Very good afternoon to you. If you're just joining us, let's go straight to our top story now, and it's all about the divisions and the turmoil currently in the ANC. We speak to analyst Asanda Ngwasheng, and she is joining us virtually. Ongama Mdimga is with the University of Nelson Mandela. He also joins us virtually. Also, we're joined by Kes Kuvadia. He's the is from the Defend Our Democracy campaign. To all of you, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you very much for making time to discuss this important issue. Asanda, can I start with you? The former President, Thabo Mbeki, that leaked audio from the special NEC meeting, warning of a split in the ANC. In your calculated guess, Asanda, why would the former president pay special attention to this issue? Why would he view it or give it such prominence, perhaps?
Well, I mean, I think we're sitting in a position where if the ANC ever was going to break up, this is a point where it certainly is more likely than it's ever been. I think probably the closest point to this was when Thabo Mbeki himself was removed from the ANC presidency, many years ago. And so I think that as somebody who still holds a light for the ANC and somebody who still has some love for the party, it's something that is important because, the longevity or the continuation of the ANC is something that I would think as a former president, not just of the country, but also of the political party, he still has an interest in whether the ANC continues or not, and he still has an interest on whether there is unity or not in the ANC. And I think that we are sitting in a situation where the so-called RET forces and the so-called New Dawn forces are coming to the biggest clash that we've seen. So it's something that's been simmering. It's something that we all knew was coming, but I don't think we necessarily could have predicted that it would come at this critical and crucial point where we are months away from an election and we're also months away from an NEC conference.
Ongama Mdimga, if I could come to you next. There is a specific mention by the former president that this possible split may come about as a result of irreconcilable ideological differences. Those last three words, irreconcilable ideological differences. Is there such, or is the former president giving his analysis? I'm trying to formulate my question properly.
Sure.
Would you say there are deep ideological differences that exist in the ANC, or is it individuals who find themselves in trouble and therefore are willing to do anything and everything to collapse the ANC?
Sure. I think the president wanted to be respectful to both camps, but it is to bring some nobleness or nobility to what otherwise is a split that's not actually based on ideology. If you look at leading up to the Nasrec conference, both camps have embraced the idea that there ought to be radical economic transformation, except that the New Dawn grouping, to borrow from Asanda, was actually pro-radical socio-economic transformation as opposed to RET. That was the only difference. So there's no issue about ideology here. At the crux of what energizes even the tensions, what fuels the tensions, are differences about the role of political power vis-a-vis the rule of law and institutions and constitutionalism in the country. That's the less glossy and a more nasty picture as to why there are warring factions in the ANC. There are those who feel that what happens in the country should be an outcome purely of political games as opposed to the rule of law. And then lastly, on this issue of the former president, my anxiety with the part that was leaked initially is that, you see, the liberation fighters have got some nostalgic commitment to the brand, which is fixated somewhere in history and is devoid of the context. If you look at the ANC and analyze it from national to local government, one message is clear. This is an enabler of kleptocracy. This is a party that has created mechanisms for the raping of national resources. So my view is that the greatest treasonous act at this stage in the ANC is to allow this facade of unity that has continued to hold these camps together. Why is it treasonous? Because it's already proven that it's a permissive environment for people with the crooked agenda to arise to higher echelons of power in government and in the party. So if you leave it as a power base like that intact, it's treasonous for South Africa and its attempts to move forward beyond politics of liberation and backward-looking politics.
Yeah. Kes Kuvadia, can I bring you into the conversation? And I know you are talking to us in your capacity as a representative of the Defend Our Democracy movement or campaign. But can I just ask you for a brief moment, before I ask for your thoughts as Defend Our Democracy campaign, can I just ask for your thoughts as CEO of Business Unity South Africa? That's the umbrella body that represents business interests in the country. In your view, an ANC that is self-destructing, what dangers does it pose for the economy of the country?
Yeah, so look, as Busa, we don't want to get involved in party political issues. What is of critical importance to us is that the ANC is a majority party in government. They make up primarily the cabinet, President Ramaphosa's cabinet, and they have the responsibility, the government has the responsibility of ensuring that an environment is created for investment and for growth in this country. Those are the critical elements we need to concentrate on and focus on if we are going to address our socio-economic challenges, if we are going to address our fiscal problems. And government has the responsibility to create political and policy certainty. And our concern would be that, be it in the ANC or anywhere else, we're talking about the ANC at the moment, our concern is that the problems in the ANC spill over into an inability of government to govern, to create certainty, and inability on the part of the president to act as the president of the country, which we ask him to do. And so those are our concerns. We're not going to immerse ourselves in the party political issues, but we do immerse ourselves, and we are extremely concerned about how this spills over into governance and government, and how it impedes the ability of government to actually do what they should be doing to improve the lot of people in this country.
And you know, on that very point, Mr. Kuvadia, I now ask you to wear your hat in the capacity in which you were invited here as a Defend Our Democracy representative. The last point about the president, when you speak to him, when you hear that there is uncertainty about whether or not he is still the president of the governing party, and he is questioned in Parliament, in what capacity are you here? Because if you are here as president of a party that is in government, maybe that might be in question. What kind of dangers does that pose when, say, for example, the president is engaged in international affairs that obviously have to benefit this country?
Look, I don't think there's any doubt that President Ramaphosa is recognized as president of this country, locally or internationally. Whatever happens in the ANC happens. I think that what the President Ramaphosa, as president of the country, needs to do is to ensure and let me speak as Protecting Our Democracy campaign, is to ensure that whatever happens in the party does not compromise his stated intention, and he's actually moved very, very well on this as President of South Africa, to deal with corruption, to deal with issues of unethical behavior, to deal with the quite honestly, thievery that has occurred in many instances. And our issue as Protecting Our Democracy is to ensure that whatever happens in the ANC in this case does not create more instability in the country, does not impact on the stated intention of President Ramaphosa to deal with ethics in this country, to deal with accountability in this country, and ethical practice both in government, private sector, and elsewhere, and accountability from government. And those are the issues that are of concern to us at Protecting Our Democracy. And that's what we would be looking out for, that if the incidents in the ANC have an impact on that, then we will raise that. We will raise that with government. Right. And we will raise that with President Ramaphosa as president of this country, because we expect him to continue his efforts to deal with these issues as president of the country.
All right. Let me ask all of you, my guests, to please stay exactly where you are, because when we return on that very note of stability of our democracy, which needs protection right now, I'm going to extend this conversation because branches of the ANC have started talking. We continue the conversation in just a moment. Very good afternoon to you. If you're just joining us, we are in conversation with analysts and the Defend Our Democracy campaign movement. And this is all got to do with the ructions in the African National Congress. That party holding a special meeting this weekend. Asana Gwashe, if I can come to you, stability of South Africa's democracy is important, and that cannot be overemphasized. But is that stability threatened at the moment when branches of the ANC in its biggest region countrywide, that's eThekwini, they've started talking, and I can't be sure as to whether they represent the entirety of the branches in eThekwini, but the ones that have spoken thus far are saying reinstate Magashule, and Zuma is going to be defended should there be a threat to try and take him to jail. But perhaps the one that we need to start with is about an early conference. Do you think that with these branches that have started talking from the biggest region of the ANC, this might catch a fire and you see other provinces coming out to either support or distance themselves from any such moves to go to an early conference?
Yeah, okay. I think that, first of all, we are supposed to be going to an election in October, so I don't think it would be a good idea for the ANC to be trying to have an election earlier than that October. So any early sort of conference will have to be after the government election. That's if the ANC still has any sense, which, I mean, is under question at this point. And then the second thing is that I think that any political upheaval within a governing party directly will lead to instability within government. What we are seeing at the moment, and that's really dangerous, is that you already have Jacob Zuma, who already has had for a number of months military veterans stationed outside his house for quite a number of months, which already was something that the ANC should have spoken out against, already was something that should have been questioned, because are we in a civil war? At which point does a former president of a country have the right to have what is actually a decommissioned military standing guard outside his house? What is the threat that he is under? And that's the first question that should have been asked a long time ago. And then the second thing that the ANC has done is that because of the rampant corruption, it has always had an effect on the delivery. And because the ANC took the route of wanting to basically find new pockets for them to be able to eat money, literally, for them to be able to feed the patronage line that seems to be, having queues that are never ending, they took every single possible point of delivery and they put it to entrepreneurs. And so things that the government initially had capacity to do, it was no longer able to do. And the Zondo Commission has given us a very clear picture of just how corrupt the ANC is, whether you're talking New Dawn or you are talking RET. But what is particularly concerning to my view about RET is that at least New Dawn seems to pretend to be interested in the interests of the country. RET is very clear on a mission that I am beginning to even think of as economic hitmanship. If you look at Tokyo Sawale and some of the, allegations that he was making, if you look at some of the tidbits of information that we are being drip-fed, because be careful to think that the leaks are just leaks. These are very strategic, giving of information based on who is trying to get what to happen where. And I think that what we are seeing is an ANC which is simply forgetting why and how it got into power in the first place. It got into power because people believed, and for many, many reasons, even long after personally I think it should have been, considered a political party that can lead people, people believed in it. And now what has happened is that people have gotten to the stage, like Ace Magashule, where they believe they have a right to rule whether the people who elected them or not. Because, in South Africa, you elect a party and the party then decides. So if the ANC says you must be recalled, you should be recallable in the same way that you were appointable. But we have created egomaniacs. We have created human beings who somehow think that they are going to have positions for life. And what the ANC decides to do in this particular instance is going to determine whether the political party is going to be destroyed forever or if it's going to be able to somehow drag itself out of the current doldrums that it's in. And I'm quite concerned by the calm that everybody seems to be displaying at this critical moment in our democracy and this critical moment in our history as a country. Because, we laugh about this, we make jokes about this, but it has huge implications for a president who spent a whole lot of our money running around the world trying to get investors. And this is what this very investors that were brought in are now being given a display of. And we need to be concerned about what's happening to the ANC and its impact on democracy and its impact on our economy and its impact just generally on our well-being, because these people are just driving us literally nuts.
Ongama Mdimga, Asanda Ngwasheng has said quite a bit. It's quite a mouthful, but I want to go back to the very last point that she makes about a president who's gone around the world looking for investment. It's $100 billion, if I'm not mistaken, that he is trying to bring into this country. How in the world does that investment come into a country where he himself finds that he might possibly not be the president of the governing party? Maybe let me refine my question and say this, that is President Ramaphosa's leadership of the ANC at the moment in question, given the talk of an early conference? If that early conference were to go ahead, what chance would he stand to be re-elected?
Sure. So that depends on whether or not they are able, President Ramaphosa now judged mainly in terms of his political survival and the political options available to him, not necessarily on an objective perspective. So on the basis of him surviving and securing office, all that needs to happen after securing a displacement of an opponent in a crucial power base in the ANC is the membership system of the country and electoral reform, sorry, not of the country, of the ANC, and the electoral reform that must take place at that level. So there are two things that are crucial in order to secure your position in the ANC. You control the SG's office. You also ensure that audit processes in addition to the campaigning that needs to be done nationally, but part of the power that's been on the Secretary General's office is the ability to control audit processes. Now, I'm talking real politic, not idealism, Paul. The real politic in the ANC is that these branches, for example, which you started the question to Asanda with, that are actually calling for Ace, to defend Ace, represent the mobilized position of lower structures, not the independently determined aspirations of the entire ANC membership. So that mobilized position is a function of what alliances have been built with the Secretary General's office throughout his time since 2017, and those will come and be manifest at this point. So if President Ramaphosa at least manages to neutralize the power of regional and provincial power brokers in relation to what choices members of the ANC make at the next conference, he at least improves his chances. And I'm not suggesting that he should control that process, but that he should neutralize the power of top structures to dictate the voting through the means of controlling and gatekeeping and vote buying, which we know happens in the ANC. But beyond that, on the question of stability of South Africa, what we are shifting from is the stability that comes from the system of dominant party. The dominant party system is known for its stability in the sense that decisions are made faster between the executive and parliament, because the executive is derived from parliament, which is derived mainly from the majority party. So it becomes easier than, for example, the US in making decisions. You're not going to have the executive stifled through parliamentary processes. But we're changing from that kind of stability. My view is that in the wider political context, we will have instability, but as far as policy outlook, as well as the extent to which government create an enabling environment for business is concerned, my message in academic and business platforms has been this: there's nothing that's going to happen that fundamentally transforms the cost of doing business in South Africa, or in fact, that fundamentally affects the policy orientation of the state in South Africa. So centrism is an established policy choice and ideological stance, and the fights that are there, including, by the way, even agitations by the EFF, if you look at the substance of its constitution, it's not a radical left departure as much as it is framed as a result of the land and one or two other issues. Political parties in South Africa are generally centrist. And I say that there's a centrist consensus. So as far as the policy outlook is concerned, there aren't greater risks. Stability, the kind of stability we've had from a dominant party system, we must forget about. Because that is no longer what we're going to have. Dominant party is declining. We are more gravitating towards the Westminster system, which, by the way, can only be an outcome because even our parliamentary system is based on that. We're going to have coalitions. And my view is that we will start seeing emergence of dominant parties again around 2029, not anytime soon. The ANC, regardless of what the ANC does now, and I agree with what Asanda was saying earlier on, that it cannot have that conference now, even though we know, even if it has the conference afterwards, my view is that it's unavoidable to have a split of the party in a way that can result in it being reduced to a less than 50% party.
Kaskuvadia, I want to go back to what Asanda Ngwasheng said, and that is that she's surprised at how calm South Africans have been at a time when the governance of our country is being threatened. You lead a campaign called Defend Our Democracy. How much support would you say it has amassed among ordinary South Africans?
I think it's amassed a fairly good base of support amongst ordinary South Africans. There's been numerous webinars involving a lot of people, a lot of interests. There's been different organizations that have backed the campaign, have had their own protests and events and public displays of banners and other paraphernalia to actually talk about protecting our democracy. And I think that is important. I think that we should all, in all areas of work that we are involved in, talk about protecting our democracy, because that is important for the country, it's important for business and society. I also think that I think Asanda's comments were spot on. I don't think we should be sanguine about this. I think that we should see the problems in the ANC, because they are the governing party, as extremely serious for the country. And I think what we're now facing is a sort of situation where the ANC, and again, I don't want to go into internal politics, but looking at what's happening in the public space and what's being reported on the ANC, I think the ANC has a couple of challenges. One, it needs to become a modern political party that can actually play a critical role in governance in this country. Two, I think it needs to separate, it needs to look at how it separates the party from the state. These are issues that have been talked about for a long time. And I think we also need to recognize that the president has appointed a committee to look at the electoral system. And the Constitutional Court actually said that our electoral system needs to be changed. So all of these are coming together, and I think we're at a point in our country, at a juncture in our country, where we all need to look at the important issues related to democracy, ethics, good governance, service delivery, an environment for investment and growth, all of that, and we need to come together to ensure that we hold government accountable for those things. And I think that's where we are in this country. And what I think it creates is a movement of civil society, which I think it is regenerating itself. And that's got to be good for democracy, and it's got to be good for governance.
That's very interesting comments. A party that is degenerating, but at the same time, that has got to be seen in a positive light. When we return, we'll continue with this conversation, but we'll conclude, and I want to focus in on the ANC needing to be a modern political party. What does that actually mean in practice? We'll delve into that in more detail. Very good afternoon to you once again if you're just joining us and you're finding us in conversation about the issues that appear to be tearing the ANC apart, in particular the step-aside issue that's thrown the party into turmoil. And we are joined by political analyst Asanda Ngwasheng and Ongama Mdimga. We're also joined by Kes Kuvadia. He's from the Defend Our Democracy campaign. Asanda Ngwasheng, I want to come back to you. Interesting comments from Kes Kuvadia just before we went on a break, and he talks about a degenerating party that in some way actually can be seen in a positive light, and it reminds me of a comment from a leader I spoke to in the ANC. I won't mention names, but the question was, how in the world can you hope for unity with people who've made it their business to basically steal from South Africans? How do you hope to forge unity with people whose orientation does not care about the people of South Africa? Simply, is the degeneration we are seeing right now in the ANC, can it be seen in a positive light?
I don't think that there's any circumstance under which it really can be in a positive light, unless you're talking about the fact that maybe the country will finally start doing actual democracy and finally actually start, exploring the options beyond party politics and also beyond the current electoral systems that we have. That's the only positive that I can see. What we're seeing also is that we have an ANC that's going into local government elections at a time when it's just recently been announced that independent candidates can run a provincial and national government. And so this is actually the one government election that the ANC should be scared of, because the path is clear for people who can and are able to garner local, support to be able to then get that support to provincial and be able to get that support to national. And what that does is that it also paves the way for us to have conversations about whether we still need to have this Westminster political system in parliament, whether we still need to be party-led in the ways that we are, or whether there aren't any new systems that can, be used. What we are suffering from, and I've said this before, is that the ANC is, Ongama spoke very eloquently about it, that the ANC is an ancient party in the sense that it still hankers to its, dodging bullets in the bush type of politics, which were important and of course got us, the freedom that we now all enjoy. But that is not the kind of party politics that we need to be harking back to. The fact that you have people who were in the trenches together, who knew each other since they were 14, trying to get under the border to get into Swaziland, now being nemesis or now being friends, it means that it's difficult to make decisions like, Ace, you have to go, because Ace is going to go back to, remember in 76 when I did this for you, remember in 96 when I did this for you, and so on and so on. And so that's why it's difficult for the ANC to make what seem to be easy decisions. And my biggest fear at the present moment is that what Ace Magashule is doing is very much a classic, walking very firmly behind the steps that Jacob Zuma has walked. And I really hope and I pray that the ANC is awake enough to the fact that South Africa cannot afford the kind of politics that got Jacob Zuma into power, and South Africa cannot afford to have, another situation where we end up with, let's have a political solution, i.e., let's let the bullies get their way. And I think that if the ANC does not stop the bullies in this particular instance, they really are going to regret it. Because we know that if you look at the ANC election numbers from 1994 to 1999, there was a drop. From 1999 all the way up until now, the ANC has been increasingly decreasing its support base. So that it's still getting more than 50% keeps giving it the illusion that it is as big a political party as it used to be. The ANC is becoming a minority of a minority of a minority of a majority. And so, yes, for as long as it gets more than 50%, even if it's 50% of 2 million votes, it's still more than what is required. But you cannot run and govern a country where a large percentage of people do not want you to be in government, because governance requires something called a social contract, and a social contract requires some level of trust. And those are things that have over time receded in South Africa, and things like the current internal war. I mean, the ANC is literally having a civil war in front of our eyes. These are the kind of things that are not going to bring any confidence to people. And for me, the biggest disappointment, by the way, in all of this is opposition politics, because opposition political parties have failed consistently to turn people, to motivate people to get up and go and vote for them instead of voting or boycotting the ANC. Because we know what the ANC relies on is that people will sit at home and boycott the ANC, and they know that there'll be enough people who go out and vote for them to get the majority of a minority. And so they don't have to do much by way of changing. And so what needs to happen is that political parties need to start showing us a real alternative. They need to start presenting themselves as a real possibility for governance and a real possibility for people. But you're looking at the DA that has people who are either with a matric or not qualified at all or lying about the qualifications. You've got a UDM who has Bantu Olomisa who has been sitting there. I mean, the guy is literally going to turn into a statue sitting in his position. And you've got the EFF, which suffers from a similar problem, because really, are you telling me there's nobody beyond Julius Malema who can lead that political party? He's already done more than one term. And so there isn't any difference in terms of the governance of the opposition parties. You've got the ACDP, which has been sitting with, I mean, that guy has been sitting there since I was probably in nappies at this point. And so we need to have opposition politics that are going to present real alternatives. Otherwise, we're going to be forced into coalition politics with the ANC still dominating to some sense. But even those coalition politics are going to cause problems, because we've seen these problems at municipal level, where the EFF was playing kingmaker and the DA was moving left and right depending on, I don't know, which way they decided the wind was going. And so we are really stuck between a rock and a hard place in South Africa. And we really need to ask ourselves, is this the democracy that we want? Is this the political system that we want? And where is this country going to go if we continue to allow the bullies that are called the ANC to run this country as if it was their own personal...
Ongamam Dimga, very briefly for me. Asanda, unfortunately, she just took the whole of the show. The ANC cannot afford to be bullied or allow itself to be bullied. What needs to happen to the bullies? Or simply put, what is the message that needs to come out very strongly out of this special meeting that still continues today?
One, the temptation to resort back to political accommodations and compromises that will keep everybody together, notwithstanding the fact that they cannot stand one another, they hate one another, should be avoided. The ANC must be allowed to go through what it is going through up to its ultimate conclusion, that the two parties that exist in one must split so that each tries its fortune outside of the party. Because now what it does is it creates an environment where there's an emergent power base derived by those in government, which is unaccountable. The ANC campaigns with a manifesto that says we're going to fight crime and corruption, while at the same time having groupings within it that are opposed to that direction, where it affects political stability as perceived narrowly in terms of political interests within the party. So you cannot have that. They mustn't relent, push, but to secure the trajectory of renewal.
All right.
Something needs to be done around membership databases and the management thereof.
All right. Keskuvadia, very briefly for me, what happens next? What needs to happen now? I think you've muted yourself.
I think I agree with Ngama that the process needs to play out in the ANC and it needs to play out to its conclusion. But in the meantime, I think that we all, as citizens of this country, certainly as protecting the democracy movement, we all need to be vigilant. We need to speak truth to power, and we need to publicly actually criticize where criticism is necessary. I think that the current conjunction in the ANC, in my view, has made President Ramaphosa a bit stronger, because those who have been going against the morals and principles of the ANC seem to be exposed. And I think that he needs to utilize that to translate that into a far more assertive stance in government and take the hard decisions that are necessary to create growth, investment, and put our country onto a sustainable, inclusive growth path so that we can start addressing problems of service delivery, inequality, poverty, and so on.
On that note, thank you very much to all my guests. Kes Kuvadia from Defend Our Democracy Campaign, thanks for your time. Ongamam Dimga, lecturer at the University of Nelson Mandela, thanks indeed for your insights. Asanda Ngwasheng, political analyst, thanks indeed for your inputs this afternoon.